guys, how's it going? So this video is going to be a deep dive into the Scorpio season. I'll be looking at the archetypes for each of the planets that's in Scorpio right now. So we have the sun, which went in overnight tonight, this past evening. There's Mercury and there's Venus. And then as we know, the moon will be there over the weekend where there's that big new moon across from Uranus. I'll be taking, this is going to be kind of more like a scholarly deep dive. So if that sounds completely uninteresting to you, this is not your video. And then I'll add some tarot cards for each of the planets and what their message is for this transit period and kind of how to better deal with it. Now I'm going to be using this book, which is called Astrology. It's from Raven Caldera. It's great. It was recommended to me by Ann Ortley, who was my astrology mentor. And basically what he does is for every planet in the signs, he finds an archetype from mythology, from history, and that archetype tends to represent the energy that particular transit best embodies. So I want to start with the keywords of Scorpio and areas that it has to deal with. Scorpio is all that we cannot control and that which lies beneath. So anytime where you feel powerless in your choice, there is Pluto or Scorpio lurking around. Anytime you take the power of choice away from someone else, that is your Pluto acting out. Now, areas of Scorpio that come up usually are death, taxes, psychological issues, inheritances, blood issues, adrenal glands, the underground, so tunnels, subways, things like that. Any one of these areas falling in love is something we have no control over, getting fully intimate, orgasm. So things like that where you are stripped of your control over the situation. Now, usually what happens in these transits is that an outside entity, a person, a situation, an institution will do something, will make a choice themselves that sort of forces your hand. So you may find yourself having to make a decision that ultimately you, if left up to you, would never have had to make. Downsizing in companies, and they give you an exit package where you can stay at a lower price rate or you can leave, but the market is bad. So it's like you ultimately didn't want to find yourself in that situation, but now you have to make a decision. And the process of you making the decision on which of the paths, which of the transformation and transmutations of these energies you want to take is going to involve a process of analyzing what you want, what your desires are, and what you're willing to sacrifice in order to obtain that which you desire, right? Like, is what I want worth the price that I have to pay for it? I'm in the process of setting up my own business, and as a dual citizen, I'm coming into all sorts of insane tax laws, right? And so one of the questions I now have to ask myself is this ultimately worth it? Is it not easier to stay where I am and do what I'm doing, but at what cost, So wherein lies my motivation? Wherein lies my desire? And how does all of that influence? Also, how do my psychological pasts and habits inform the choice that I now have to make? Now, these are usually the situations that come up during Scorpio transits. We have 4 planets there, so that's a lot. Or we will for that short period of time. And then when the moon moves out of Scorpio, we'll still have 3. However, Mercury will be going retrograde, so he'll be staying in Scorpio for a very long time. And then towards November 22nd, I believe, Mars moves into Scorpio. At that time, Venus will be out, the sun will be moving its way out. And the only 2 bodies that will continue to be in Scorpio are Mercury and Mars. And that's interesting because it means that this entire Scorpio period, this first part right now, is really about that information gathering process, right? So understanding the dynamics of the situation in which you are either feeling powerless or making someone else feel powerless, because these are energies that come at us. They either come at us from the outside or come from the inside. So you may be the Scorpio or the one behaving like the Scorpio in the situation. So understanding this process of understanding the dynamics of the situation, Pluto situations, Scorpionic situations are always in 3. And we'll talk about this in a second, how the 3 repeats through actually all of the archetypes that we'll be looking at. So there's usually some sort of triangle. As I said, there's one person making a decision and then 2 choices, or there's one person who has to choose between 2 people, or one with 2 options, so any sort of triangle, you'll notice that triangular situations start coming to a head now. So you'll be gathering information, understanding the dynamics of the situation, understanding the motivations behind each person as they act, and why are they doing this, and why are they putting you in this situation, or why are you putting them in this situation? And then understanding the risk reward analysis. How much do I want this? How much is it going to cost me to obtain? And is what I have to give up to get it, because there is always a price where Pluto is involved. You have to give him something to get something back. Am I willing to pay the price to obtain what it is that I want? And then you'll find that when Mars comes into Scorpio at the end of November, that'll start being the decision-making time. So this next period here between today, October 24th, and November 22nd, is really going to be an interesting time for investigation time. So expect to do deep dives across the board. Expect information to come out. And if information is not coming out, it may be that you actually have to go and find it. I would suggest that you take no situation at face value at the moment. Or if it seems too good to be true, it likely is. Without getting paranoid, which is another keyword of Scorpio, but make sure you know through and through what's actually happening in everything that's going on in your life. So like I was saying, my business example, I could easily have just said, okay, I'm going to start my business, open it here in Italy, and who cares? But then of course, if I'd done that, I would have found that I had fallen into this giant abyss of a cobweb of rules and regulations. So you want to investigate whatever you're working on, whatever situation you have going on, without the point of obsession or paranoia. You want to make sure you're investigating, that you know at 360 degrees what you need to know about what's in front of you, that thing that you desire, because it's entirely possible that what you think you know is not the entire story. That tends to be another piece of Scorpio transits, that there's usually 3 faces to everything. Again, life, death, rebirth. Now let's talk about the archetypes for a second. So the archetype that Raven gives for the sun in Scorpio is Shiva. Now Shiva is the destroyer. Shiva is, there's a great line, actually I'm going to read it to you because I love it, where he says, I loathe halfway measures. This comes from the Shiva invocation in Hermaphrodites. I loathe halfway measures. When you are trying to find the right distance between the heat of the fire and the cold beyond it, you may know me as the solution which urges you to leap directly into the flames, right? So there's no real middle ground with Shiva. He's also someone who can go up on the mountaintop for 10 years and reach a state of enlightenment, and then the next day he comes down on to earth on a sex bender, so it's these sort of like extreme swinging extremes from one to the other, and living with that state of duality, of not trying to find the compromise between the 2 elements, but living the fullest of, it's not either or but both all the time. Like when you're in it, you're all in it. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. So a lot of the questions that he will be pulling up for you now are questions of life, death, rebirth, gain, loss, regain, Because again, all energy is transmuted. So there is no such thing as death. It just becomes something else. So out of the ashes, what can you build? Or what is luring you like a moth to the flame? What are you suppressing that's actually there just underneath the surface that you're trying really hard to ignore? Because that's you trying to control something out, but the more you try and control it, the more power it actually has. From the pressure of resistance, it gains strength. So what can you learn through submission? What's driving you? What makes you burn with desire? And what makes you feel like you're losing yourself? But not necessarily in a bad way. He submits completely in front of Kali, willingly. He becomes a willingly submissive lover in her presence. So what is it that drives you to the point of that much desire that you're actually willing to lose yourself? And what does that mean in terms of willing to lose yourself? Like, what piece of your identity are you willing to give up in order to obtain that which you so powerfully desire? Now, the second archetype is for the moon in Scorpio, and the archetype that he's chosen is Hecate. She is the sorceress of control, and now she was a wizardess and an enchantress, but all of her spells were aimed at controlling other people. And it was said that she had 3 faces, right? So the sun in Scorpio, Shiva, has 3 phases: life, death, rebirth. Moon in Scorpio, associated with Hecate, who had 3 faces of the moon. And she has an interesting dilemma between growth and death, right? So there's a part of her that wants to nurture, but there's also a part of her that wants to just kill it off. So you might find Scorpio people who, moon and Scorpio people who behave really self-sabotagingly. Like, they carry forward relationships and then will do something that they know perfectly well is going to blow up the relationship. That's a moon in Scorpio behavior, right? And that moon in Scorpio is right on the sun in direct opposition with Uranus. Now, a moon-Uranus opposition, I know because I have it, is a very sudden reversal change of heart, right? So it's kind of like the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. There may be something that you've been forgiving or ignoring or just not wanting to deal with, or, just saying, it's fine. Usually when the moon goes into opposition with Uranus, somewhere you're like, okay, no, done, enough, basta. Basta's Italian for I've had enough. And you just all of a sudden out of nowhere, and usually the other people don't understand your behavior. They say, oh, she's so hyper reactive, high drama, stuff like that. But because it's been building up for a long time, why you've suddenly changed your mind about that. But people can lose long-term friendships over things like that. You can just suddenly quit your job. There will be a situation, just look at my notes here, okay, in that new moon, and I'll do a reading specifically about the moon, about the new moon. So if you have a situation around something that you value physically, sensually, monetarily, or even ethically that you've been trying to forgive or overlook, or have been explaining it away, this new moon may bring you a potentially profound sort of fuck it moment where you're like, nah, done. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Actually, no, sorry. So here are the questions that the moon in Scorpio will be asking you. Watch your self-sabotage. Are you nurturing that which you desire, or are you destroying it? And if so, why? But understanding the underpinnings of your own psychology are fundamental and are part of this next month process to understand sometimes why we do the things that we do, why we want the things that we want, in order also for us to be able to choose consciously so that it's not just, we're not being driven by that 95% of the iceberg that lies underneath, but also so you can choose consciously in a way, it's like, oh, okay, I've gotten clear on that pattern. Let me make a different decision for the future. So that moon in Scorpio, pay attention to where you may be your own worst enemy, where you may be showing situations three faces, or pay attention to other people who may have three faces. If you notice that one person tells you one thing and then the next day they tell you something else, go deeper, find out more, ask more questions, understand, why the change in information. Try and get a little bit deeper into that. All right, let's look at Mercury in Scorpio. So Mercury in Scorpio is the Morrigan, which is an Irish figure. It's a maiden, or the three stages of woman, but the Morrigan is most frequently what we would call the ugly old witch, right? She is known as the storm crow and is usually a harbinger of news that we don't necessarily want to hear, most associated with like crows. She's someone you would expect to see around Halloween. So like that kind of figure with the broken nose and the pointy hat and stuff like that. She is, as he says, she uses words of power that are intended to wound, and no one has the ability to throw vitriol the way that this woman does. So while Mercury is in Scorpio, we may be saying things that wound. We may be feeling wounded by things that people say. However, in the things that are being said, it's important to distinguish what is being said as an attempt to control. So where are you trying to control, or where are people trying to control you? But also, where's the truth in that sentence, right? What warnings might there be that you don't want to listen to? One of the examples that he gives is, do you marry the guy who actually beat you up on the third date, right? Like, pay attention, give clues like that. Storm crows, give them their due attention. Don't brush things off. Go deeper, understand. Well, do you have a history of doing that? This is really about sort of investigative sleuthing this period and trying to understand everything there is to know about what's going on. And then the final, this is my favorite, and actually I'm going to read pieces of this because I love this story, is Venus in Scorpio. He associates with Inanna, which is the Sumerian equivalent of Venus. And she was the goddess of fertility, the queen of fertility and war, which is odd. Again, there's that death and rebirth. And she was the goddess of love. Now, one of the things, so let me read you a little bit of pieces of this, because this is one of my favorite stories. And it says, in the myth of Inanna, the queen of heaven hears now, all right, I'll just read it. Shush. In the myth of Inanna, the queen of heaven hears that her sister, Ershkigal, the goddess of the dead, has lost her husband. She hears Ershkigal through the ground weeping and decides to visit her, leaving her lover Dumuzi in charge. She sets Dumuzi's sister, Nishubur, at the gate of the underworld with orders to go for help if she does not return in 3 days and descends. So there's this three again: death, life, death, rebirth, the three faces of the moon, the three stages of womanhood. Anyway, she's greeted by 7 gates, okay, each of whom has a guardian, and they require her to be stripped of all her jewels and garments before she can enter the realm of Ershkigal. And so this is a descent into the underworld. And at every single stage, everything that she identifies with as making her the queen of life, she loses. She's being stripped bare as she descends to face her alter ego, the sister, right? Her darker side. And this is a great thing that he says that I love. This is a part of Venus and Scorpio's path. Although she likes to strip away all the illusions and defenses of others, as a fixed sign, she finds it hard to give up her own. Part of learning to trust and truly going into the depths with someone else means that you both have to get naked. So in those situations, you know, when it's like, no, I want the other person to fall in love, but I'm going to stay like calm and chill. This is one of those situations where it pulls you down and takes away your identifying jewelry one piece at a time. Continuing. Anyway, so Inanna comes before Ereshkigal naked, and Ereshkigal scorns her, openly jealous that Inanna has a spouse, while she, her bereaved sister, does not. There's some question about Inanna's motivation in coming down to see Ereshkigal. Is it comfort, catharsis, or gloating? Piercing Inanna with the eye of death, Ereshkigal paralyzes her and hangs her on the wall above her throne from several meat hooks. Brutal, right? There, Inanna reaches the point that has been called the catabasis, the bottom of the pit, the point from which there can only be a rebirth. And so in situations like this, usually when you have, like, this is classic of people that find themselves in narcissistic relationships. When you get to that point, when you've discovered that the person in front of you is an incurable narcissist, and you feel like your whole life is like bottomed out, there's really only one place to go from there, which is great, right? Because there's a famous saying that there's nothing more dangerous than a man with nothing to lose. Okay, so moving on. Anyway, so Nishabar waits 3 days and runs back to the gods, telling them that Inanna has been captured. They know that Ereshkigal is unlikely to hear an appeal from any of them, so they cleverly create 2 messengers who are neither wholly male nor female, much like Shiva, and send them down to her. Seeing the sad Ereshkigal, they weep for her and give her their sympathy, and she's so moved by them that she allows Inanna to go free, on one condition. Everyone she meets must be glad to see her come back, and the first person who is not glad to see her must take her place. At this point, it becomes obvious that Ereshkigal knows something that Inanna has not yet faced, right? So this is about triangular situations, deep diving, finding out stuff that you need to know, because not everything is as it appears. I'll continue. Inanna emerges from the underworld, renewed and triumphant, back from the dead, and escorted by a cloud of chittering underworld demons. Nishubar runs ahead of her, warning everyone to act as if they're glad to see her. But she does not reach Inanna's palace before the Queen of Heaven and her demon entourage. Their disaster awaits. As soon as it had become clear that Inanna was trapped in the underworld and unlikely return, Dumuzi, her husband, had set himself up to rule in her place. He was so busy glorying in his new position, the power that he took over from her, that he had not bothered to take part in the rescue effort and didn't know she was about to come back. When she barges through the door, he's taken aback and unable to hide his disappointment. The demons leap on him and carry him off to Ereshkigal, who has now managed to turn the tables on her sister. Right? So this story is full of everything: revenge, cheating, death. But what comes out ultimately is Inanna keeps her reign, right? She returns as the queen of the living, but now she knows the truth, right? She knows that her husband was not to be trusted. She knows that her sister was not to be trusted. And so she can face this reign as a new person. And with new understanding also on how to move forward in the future, right? So this is kind of this is what I said, this is the energy that's behind this right now. You may be forced to choose, you may find your hand forced, that you have to choose one direction or the other. I would investigate people's motives. I would understand what price you're willing to pay. Like, are you willing to go down to confront the dark half? Because there's going to be a price to pay, and it may involve learning something that you didn't know or didn't even want to know. However, as Shiva is the destroyer of illusions, what ultimately comes out of this period is the truth, like the actual truth, because that's when we move into Sagittarius, right? That's Sagittarius wants only the most authentic, and he can't deal with the authentic. You cannot walk into Zeus's house with lies, right? So whatever the lies and the bullshit are need to get cleaned out in the period beforehand, before we can step into Zeus's throne. Okay, so let's take a very quick look at the cards now. I'll be right back. Okay, so can I get a card, please, for the energy of the Sun in Scorpio during this transit? What's the Sun in Scorpio going to tell us during this transit? Justice. Fair and just decisions. Do what you know is right. Stand up for your beliefs. Okay, so this will be... and then I'll go through and get some advice from all those. Can I get a card, please, for the, hold on, Moon in Scorpio? What's the Moon in Scorpio going to be telling us? 8, Scorpio house, by the way. What is the Moon in Scorpio going to be bringing us during this transit? Moon in Scorpio, what's its energy? Moon in Scorpio, please. Okay. 5 Swords. Unwise choice. Learn what you can from this situation. Review everyone's motives. Okay, so that's what I was talking about. Don't take situations on their face value right now. Understand what's driving people, why they're going to move the way they're going to move, because someone's gaming somewhere. Now, the other thing I wanted to say about this is, see, this is sort of an unusual. Now, usually Justice is the Libra card, right? But look at him. He's the phoenix rising from the ashes. It's like he's made the decision, and now he's got this sword where he knows what needs to go, right? So after weighing things up, then it's time to sort of rise up and cut some stuff out, or like bring down the sentence, which sentencing is very Scorpionic. So let's get a card, please, that represents the energy for Mercury in Scorpio. A card for Mercury in Scorpio. Strength. Great inner strength. Release harsh judgments, forgiveness, and compassion. So this is interesting. It's another arcana that comes up. So, and there's this sort of sword of truth, right? Talking about the head over the emotions and logic dominating that drive. But first to understand, you know, and it's sort of like this wielding this sword here of understanding, because this is also like putting down the swords and knowing when to walk away from a game or having to win at any cost. And this says that, you know, sometimes to move forward, you have to make some tough decisions. Release harsh judgments. You know, and this is interesting. It's kind of like what I was saying in my last reading that came up, is that just because someone is not on the up and up doesn't mean you have to take it with you, because that's just you carrying a bigger burden along with it. So in order to be able to move forward with this power of the lion underneath you, you have to be able to release that which isn't useful, and not carry these judgments with you, you know. So like bring down the sentence, understand people's motivations, but then it's like once it's done, it has to be released and burnt into the atmosphere, because moving into Sagittarius is really going to be about leveling up, especially since we'll get the last pieces of Jupiter being there. So let's get the last one. Can we get the energy, please, for Venus and Scorpio? Energy for Venus and Scorpio. Okay. 10 of Pentacles and the Magician. Okay, so very nice. Very happy family life, financial security, finding magic in the little things in life. And the Magician. So you're ready, you have the resources or the ability to manifest them. So, you know, it's like after the death and reawakening, there is a new beginning, because you go from the 11 to the 1. and start over, but with, also 10, so that's a 1 also. So there is like a process of cutting out that which is understanding what people's motivations have been, bringing down the sentence after a fair and logical appraisal, dominating wisdom and thought over emotion. So yes, again, we talked about like, what is it that I desire? What am I willing to pay for it? And using those sort of logical questions about this raging tiger energy in order to make smart new beginnings that are ultimately going to bring you here. Okay, so I'm going to do, I know it's getting really, really long, but I'm going to do, since we've been talking about going to the depths, I'm going to switch the deck I wanted to use. I want to get a light energy. Okay, so we've been talking about going down to the depths of things and understanding motivation, what lies beneath. Can I get, for this entire Scorpio season, please, some advice on how to work our light as we go down into the abyss? How to work our light as we head into the abyss, please, for the Scorpio season. Okay, the Pleiades, double mission, channeling and uplifting humanity. So interesting, and it talks about that sort of duplicating thing. It's like, so somehow also in your process of going through this, there is a deeper understanding of humanity, light workers, also possibly a becoming of a light worker through this process, that in the process of, being burnt and renewed, that you are reborn as a star, as a shooting star, as you ascend to that higher realms. So this is, it's kind of like in the going to the depths, you will find the highest heights, which I really couldn't have picked a more Scorpionic message, even if I had picked it out myself. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. I will see you for the new moon reading, and wishing everyone a very good Scorpio season. Bye.